You need to understand when an avoidant finally says certain quiet words, words that sound small or casual on the surface, it can be the closest they have ever come to admitting love, because avoidants rarely announce love with fireworks. They reveal it in fragments, in slips of honesty, in sentences that carry far more weight than they sound like they should. Imagine this. You're sitting across from them, maybe it's in the car after a long day, maybe it's on a walk where the world feels softer, maybe it's late at night when people stop performing and start being real. The conversation is normal, almost ordinary, and then they say something, almost like they didn't mean to. "I'm not used to this," they mutter, or "this feels different," or "I don't know why, but I feel safe with you." And you might blink because it doesn't sound like "I love you," it doesn't sound like a grand confession, it doesn't sound like the kind of line you see in movies, but if you understand avoidant psychology, you will feel the shift in the air, because for them, that sentence is not small, it is exposed. You need to understand what it costs an avoidant to speak like that. Their whole system is built on control, not because they want power over you, but because control is how they keep themselves from feeling too much. Many avoidants learned early that needing people is dangerous, that emotions invite disappointment, that closeness comes with a price. So they became self-sufficient. They became the person who handles it alone, the person who stays composed, the person who doesn't ask for help and doesn't show too much, and doesn't let anyone see the places where they might actually be soft. That is their survival. That is their identity. That is the wall that kept them standing when life taught them that vulnerability can hurt. So when you hear an avoidant say, "I'm not good at this," it's not just a throwaway line. It's them admitting they feel out of their depth. It's them acknowledging that what's happening between you has entered territory they cannot fully control. Because love, real love, threatens the avoidant's biggest comfort, emotional distance. Love invites closeness. Closeness invites dependence. And dependence invites the very fear they've been dodging their whole life. The fear of being hurt, the fear of losing themselves, the fear of needing someone who might leave. That's why their love can look confusing at first. They may move toward you and then pull back. They may open up and then go quiet. They may show care through actions but struggle with words. It can feel like they are giving you warmth with one hand and taking it away with the other. But often, what's happening is not a lack of feeling, it's an overload of feeling. Their nervous system is not built for steady intimacy, it's built for self-protection. So when they get close, their body can interpret it like danger, even when their heart is choosing you. Now, let me tell you what those already in love sentences often sound like, because you may have heard them and dismissed them. "I'm not used to someone like you. I don't want to mess this up. I'm trying. I don't usually talk about this. I've never told anyone that. It scares me how much I think about you." For many people, these lines sound like uncertainty. For an avoidant, these lines are courage. These lines are them stepping out of the armor for a second, showing you the part of them that usually stays hidden, the part that actually cares deeply but doesn't always know how to carry it. And here's the emotional truth. The avoidant isn't afraid because you're too much. They're afraid because it's real. They're afraid because they feel something they cannot neatly compartmentalize. They're afraid because you are not a casual moment anymore. You are a person who could matter, a person who could change them, a person who could hurt them if it goes wrong. Avoidants fear the very thing they secretly crave, a safe place to be human without being punished for it. So when an avoidant says something that sounds small but vulnerable, the most important thing you can do is not rush past it. Don't interrogate it. Don't demand they say more. Don't turn their bravery into pressure, because pressure is the fastest way to make an avoidant retreat. If you respond with, "So what does that mean?" in a tone that demands certainty, they will feel cornered. If you respond with, "Do you love me or not?" they will feel trapped. And when they feel trapped, they don't lean in, they shut down. Instead, the most powerful response is steadiness. A calm, grounded, emotionally mature steadiness that says, "I hear you." Something as simple as, "Thank you for telling me that," can do more than 100 emotional speeches. Because for the avoidant, being met with safety after vulnerability rewires them. It teaches them that closeness doesn't have to end in panic. It teaches them that honesty doesn't lead to punishment. It teaches them that they can be seen and still be respected. And please understand this. Their love will not always be loud in the beginning, but it will show itself in moments of protection, in small acts, in consistency they are learning to build, in the fact that they keep coming back even when it scares them. When an avoidant is already in love, you often see them trying, not perfectly, but sincerely. You see them learning your world. You see them making room, even if it's uncomfortable. You see them choosing connection in small steps when their instinct is to run. That is why those quiet sentences matter so much, because they are the fingerprints of love on an avoidant heart. Love doesn't always arrive as a declaration. Sometimes it arrives as a confession of fear. Sometimes it arrives as an awkward truth. Sometimes it arrives as a sentence that ends quickly because they're scared you might look at them differently for saying it. But if you listen closely, if you understand what it cost them, you'll realize they weren't just talking, they were revealing. And in avoidant language, revealing is often the first real proof that love has already begun. You need to understand, the avoidant mind is not built to welcome vulnerability the way yours might be. It is built to protect itself from it. And that is why the smallest emotional reveal from them can mean more than 1,000 loud promises from someone else. When an avoidant begins to let you into their inner world, even in tiny fragments, you are not witnessing casual honesty. You are witnessing a wall shifting, a defense loosening, a nervous system learning, slowly and reluctantly, that closeness might not destroy them. Picture it like this. You're with them on an ordinary day. Nothing dramatic, no big moment planned. Maybe you're laughing. Maybe you're just sitting quietly. Maybe you're talking about something simple. And then, unexpectedly, they share something that doesn't match the mask they usually wear. They tell you about a childhood memory. They admit they get overwhelmed. They confess they don't know how to handle strong emotions. They say, almost like they're embarrassed to say it, "I'm not good at this," or "I don't always know what to do when things get serious." To you, it might sound like uncertainty. To them, it is exposure. It is them stepping into a room they usually keep locked. Because you need to understand what avoidant protection looks like from the inside. Many avoidants learned early that their feelings weren't safe to express. Maybe they were dismissed. Maybe they were shamed. Maybe they were met with anger. Maybe they had to become the strong one too soon. So their nervous system adapted, and the adaptation was simple. Don't need too much. Don't feel too much. Don't show too much. They became fluent in distance. They became skilled at appearing calm, while everything inside them tightens the moment intimacy gets real. That's why they can be so present in light moments and so absent when emotional closeness arrives, because closeness isn't just closeness to them, it's risk. So when they start letting you see their inner world, it matters. It means your presence has begun to feel like a place where they can put the armor down for a second. And that is huge, because avoidants don't open up because someone is demanding it. They open up when their body starts to believe it might be safe. Safety is not a logical decision for them, it's a feeling. It's a nervous system response. That's why you could have been kind to them for months, and then suddenly, one night, they say something real, something tender, something honest, and you feel it in your chest like a quiet earthquake. This is also why avoidant love can look like a strange contradiction. They care, and then they disappear. They miss you, and then they go cold. They want closeness, and then they create distance. From the outside, it can look like games. Inside them, it often feels like conflict. Their heart moves toward you, and their nervous system pulls them back. They start to experience something they don't have much practice holding, emotional dependence. Not in a weak way, but in a human way. The truth that you matter, that you affect them, that losing you would hurt. And that truth is terrifying to someone who has built their identity around being unaffected. So you might hear them say something like, "I've never told anyone that," or "I don't normally talk about this," or "I feel weird saying this." And you need to understand what that really is. That is them letting you see the real them. That is them giving you a piece of their inner world, the part they usually keep private, because privacy has always been their protection. It's not always romantic in the way you wish it would be. It's not always wrapped in pretty words. Sometimes it's clumsy, sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it comes out as a joke. But the meaning is the same. They are letting you in. And when that happens, your response matters more than you realize, because the avoidant nervous system is watching. It is watching to see if vulnerability will be punished. It is watching to see if honesty will be used against them. It is watching to see if you will turn their confession into pressure. If you meet that moment with interrogation, with demands, with, "So what are we?" or "Do you love me?" you might accidentally trigger the exact fear that makes them retreat. Not because your question is wrong, but because the timing can feel like a trap. For them, being cornered emotionally can feel like losing control, and losing control feels unsafe. But if you meet that moment with steadiness, something soft but grounded, something like, "Thank you for telling me," something like, "I'm glad you shared that with me," you create a new association. You teach their nervous system that closeness doesn't equal danger. You teach them that being real doesn't make them lose their freedom. You teach them that they can step toward you and still keep their dignity. And that's when you start to see something beautiful happen over time. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually. They begin to open more. They begin to communicate more. They begin to stay present longer. Because now vulnerability has a safer landing place. Now, I need you to understand something that will protect your heart, because this is where people get hurt. An avoidant opening up is not a guarantee of change, it is a signal of possibility. It means they feel something. It means they trust you with a piece of themselves. But it doesn't automatically mean they are ready to love in a consistent, mature way. That part depends on whether they are willing to do the inner work, whether they can face their patterns, whether they can tolerate the discomfort of closeness without running. Your empathy can support them, but it cannot replace their responsibility. So hold this truth carefully. When an avoidant starts sharing their inner world, it can mean their emotional walls are already shifting, and that shift is often the first quiet sign of love. But your job is not to chase the shift. Your job is to stay steady, to stay honest, to keep your standards, and to watch for consistency. Because real love is not only what someone feels in private, it's what they choose in practice. And when an avoidant chooses to keep showing up, even when it scares them, that is when their love stops being a secret inside their chest and becomes something you can finally feel safely in your life. You need to understand, when an avoidant says, "I'm not good at this," or "I don't want to mess this up," or "I'm scared of getting too attached," it can sound like hesitation, but very often it is the language of someone who is already in love, someone who already cares deeply and is now standing at the edge of the one thing they've spent their life avoiding: emotional exposure. Let me take you into a moment that might feel familiar. You're finally having a real conversation, not the surface level kind, not the polite kind, but the kind where feelings begin to show up. You can feel your heart leaning forward because you've been waiting for this. You've been craving clarity. You've been hoping for the moment where they finally stop hiding. And then they say something that is honest but not romantic. They don't say, "I love you." They say, "I don't know how to do relationships." Or they sigh and say, "This is hard for me." Or they look away and whisper, "I'm trying." And for a second, your heart drops because you wanted certainty, you wanted warmth, you wanted the words that would finally calm the questions inside you. But you need to understand what is happening beneath those words. Avoidants do not fear love because they don't want it. Many fear love because they know what it can cost. They have lived through closeness that felt unsafe, closeness that came with pressure, closeness that required them to abandon themselves, closeness that ended in disappointment. So they built a system, an internal rule. Stay in control, stay independent, stay unbothered, and you will survive. They learned to keep their needs small. They learned to rely on themselves. They learned to act like they don't care too much, because caring too much feels like handing someone the power to hurt you. So when an avoidant begins to care, truly care, it doesn't feel like butterflies to them. It can feel like danger. It can feel like losing control. It can feel like stepping into deep water when they only ever learned how to stand on the shore. That is why their honesty comes out as fear. That is why their affection sometimes comes with hesitation. That is why their love can sound like a warning, because their nervous system is trying to protect them at the exact moment their heart is trying to connect. When they say, "I don't want to mess this up," you might hear insecurity, but what that can also mean is, "This matters to me enough that I'm afraid." When they say, "I'm not good at this," you might hear an excuse. But what it can also mean is, "I don't have practice being vulnerable, but you're making me face that." When they say, "I'm scared," you might hear doubt. But what it can also mean is, "I feel something real and I don't know how to hold it without running." Those sentences are not always the end of love. Sometimes they are the first honest evidence that love is already there, because avoidants do not become afraid when they feel nothing. They become afraid when they feel too much. And that is the painful, beautiful paradox. Their fear can be proof of their feeling. Not all fear, of course, because fear without responsibility can become a cycle that breaks you. But fear paired with honesty, fear paired with effort, fear paired with a willingness to grow. That is a different story. That is someone standing in front of their own pattern and finally admitting, I've built my life around distance, but you are making me want closeness. And that admission, even when it's clumsy, even when it's quiet, is not nothing. It is huge. Now, here is where your heart needs maturity, because this is the part people get wrong. When you hear those words, you may feel the urge to fix them, to comfort them, to reassure them so deeply that you accidentally take responsibility for their fear. You may start over-explaining. You may start proving. You may start chasing their reassurance, hoping your love will calm their nervous system. But you need to understand you can be kind without becoming responsible. You can be patient without becoming a doormat. You can be understanding without shrinking your needs into silence. Because if you respond to their fear by abandoning your standards, you teach the relationship a dangerous rule. Their discomfort becomes your sacrifice, and then your love turns into emotional labor, and their love turns into occasional moments of warmth followed by long stretches of distance. That is not the love you deserve. The love you deserve is not just someone who feels something, but someone who chooses you in a way that is consistent, someone who builds safety with you, someone who stays present even when emotions rise. So the healthiest response to an avoidance vulnerable confession is not pressure, and it's not emotional chasing. It's steadiness. It's the calm strength that says, I hear you and I appreciate your honesty. It's the warmth that says, we can take this slowly without saying, I will accept less. It's the clarity that says, I want a real relationship, without begging them to agree. It's the self-respect that remains intact even while your heart stays open. And you will know the difference between an avoidant who is already in love and an avoidant who is simply enjoying your presence by what happens after the confession. Do they follow their honesty with effort? Do they come back with consistency? Do they communicate, even imperfectly, instead of disappearing? Do they try to repair when they withdraw? Do they take accountability for their patterns? Because love is not only what someone feels in the quiet of their chest, love is what they build in the daylight of your life. If they are already in love, you will see it in the way they keep choosing you in small, steady steps, even when it scares them. You will see it in the way they try to learn your world. You will see it in the way they make room, not just for you to exist, but for you to be loved properly. And if they cannot do that, then their words, no matter how vulnerable, are not enough to hold your heart safely. So yes, when an avoidant says those fearful, honest sentences, they may already be in love. But you need to understand the real question is not whether they feel it. The real question is whether they will face themselves for it. Because the love that lasts is not the love that is intense in private and distant in public. The love that lasts is the love that learns, grows, and shows up even when fear is present. You need to understand, avoidant love does not arrive like fireworks. It arrives like a candle in a dark room, quiet, careful, almost hidden, but real. It rarely announces itself with grand speeches. It rarely rushes in with certainty, and it almost never looks the way you imagined love would look when you were younger. With an avoidant, love often enters through the side door, through small admissions, through subtle choices, through the moments where they do something that costs them comfort, and they do it anyway because you matter. Let me tell it to you in a way that feels human, because you've lived this. You've felt the confusion of someone who can be warm one day and distant the next. You've felt the ache of a message left unread, the silence that feels louder than words, the sudden shift in tone that makes your stomach drop. You've asked yourself, if they care, why does it feel like I'm alone in this? And you've also seen the other side, the moments that keep you hoping, the way they look at you when they forget to guard themselves, the way they show up when it counts, the way they soften, briefly, like their heart is trying to speak through the armor. That is what avoidant love is like at first. It is not a straight line. It is a series of brave moments, because you need to understand what closeness costs an avoidant. Closeness is not just romance to them, it is risk. It is exposure. It is the possibility of needing someone, and needing someone is the very thing they train themselves not to do. Many avoidants learned long before you arrived that reliance leads to pain, that vulnerability invites disappointment, that the safest way to survive emotionally is to stand alone. So they become experts at appearing fine. They become experts at keeping things light. They become experts at leaving before they can be left. They do not do this because they are heartless. They do it because their nervous system believes distance equals safety. So when love begins to grow inside them, it doesn't always feel like happiness. Sometimes it feels like panic. Sometimes it feels like pressure. Sometimes it feels like losing control of their carefully managed world. That's why avoidant love arrives quietly, because quiet is what they can tolerate. A candle, not fireworks. A small flame, not a wildfire. And when that flame begins to grow, you'll notice it in the moments that look small to everyone else, but are massive for them. You might notice they start checking in more, not constantly, but consistently. You might notice they start letting you into their routines, the private spaces of their life, the places they usually keep protected. You might notice they start remembering details, not to impress you, but because they actually care. You might notice they start making plans that go beyond the next day, even if they say it casually, even if they pretend it's not a big deal. You might notice they start saying things like, "I'm not used to this," or "this feels different," or "I don't want to lose what we have." And you might be tempted to think, that's not enough. But you need to understand, in avoidant language, that is a confession. Because an avoidant rarely says, "I'm in love," the way you want to hear it. They often show love in ways that feel indirect. They show it through effort, through protection, through acts that keep you close while their words stay cautious. They might not be good at reassurance, but they might be good at showing up when you need support. They might not be good at emotional speeches, but they might be good at making sure you got home safe, making sure you ate, making sure you're okay. They do love before they can say love. And that can feel unfair when your heart wants clarity, but it is often their way of trying, their way of learning how to be close without feeling swallowed. Now, here is where your heart needs both softness and strength, because this is where people get trapped. If you mistake the candle for fireworks, you may spend your life waiting for a moment that may not come. If you keep accepting inconsistency because you believe love is hiding under it, you can end up paying for the relationship with your peace. So you need to understand this balance. Avoidant love may arrive quietly, but love still has to become consistent to be safe. Quiet love can be real, but real love must also be reliable. So when you're with an avoidant, you don't measure love only by intensity, you measure it by growth. Are they becoming more present over time? Are they learning to communicate instead of disappearing? Are they able to repair after conflict? Are they willing to face their patterns? Are they building a relationship that doesn't require you to chase, guess, or shrink? Because love is not supposed to keep you anxious. Love is supposed to help you breathe. And I want you to hear this part, because it's the most heart-touching truth in all of this. An avoidant can fall in love and still be terrified of it. They can care deeply and still struggle to show it the way you need. They can miss you and still need space. That doesn't mean you are unlovable. That doesn't mean you are too much. It means you are standing close to someone who has never learned how to hold closeness without fear. But your empathy must never become your prison. You can understand their fear and still require respect. You can be patient and still have standards. You can recognize that their love arrives quietly and still say, "I need consistency." Because the goal is not to decode someone's hidden feelings for the rest of your life. The goal is to be loved in a way that is clear, steady, and safe. So if you are watching an avoidant, wondering if they are already in love, look for the candle. Look for the small flame of effort, the quiet moments of honesty, the slight softening of their walls, the consistent returning, the willingness to stay present when emotions rise. And if that flame keeps growing, if they keep choosing you with real actions, if they keep showing up even when it scares them, then yes, you are witnessing something real. You are witnessing a person who is learning a new language, the language of closeness, the language of love, the language of staying. And if they cannot keep that flame alive, if they keep using fear as a reason to disappear, if you are constantly left guessing, then you need to understand this too. Love that stays hidden forever is not love that can hold you. You deserve more than a candle that keeps getting blown out. You deserve a love that can stand in the open, a love that doesn't punish you for wanting warmth, a love that feels like home, not like waiting.